Athol Hospital. So you came out of service and got a job there as a lab tech.
Yep.
Tell me about the first weeks being back in the States.
The first week I was here, I came home the first day, when I came home in July, when I brought my wife home, and I went and applied for a job. There wasn't any openings then. And the last week in November, I got a letter from the lab director that said there was an opening. A girl going to have a baby in November, and there'd be an opening, and that the pay would be $87 a week, right? And so I accepted it, and it said yeah. And when I get out in December, I could start in January. So I went to my first working day was January 6th, 1966. And I went in, and my boss came up. She said, oh, by the way, she said, everybody got a pay raise the first of the year, and it's not going to be 87. You're going to get $95 a week. And I goes, wow, where else can you start a job without never working and get a pay raise all the way up to $95? And if I worked Saturday mornings, I got $13 extra. So I mean, but back in those, you were lucky to make that money. But I found out it was a very busy hospital at that time, and thoroughly enjoyed working with the patients. That was one of my best attributes, was working with the patients. I had a rapport that was well with them, and some nice people to work with. So I really enjoyed the hospital.
Okay, so you said you had some nice people to work with. Who did you work with?
Probably she became probably one of my best lifelong friends was Jean Torderson. She lived in Athol, and we just hit it off, and we became best of friends for years. I know her family and my family. We know each other. Her kids went to school with my kids and everything, but she was an excellent lab technician. And back then, I was the only guy in the lab. We probably didn't get another guy in the lab for 20, 25 years. So it's a little different when you're working with all women. I enjoyed it tremendously. They were great workers and great lab technicians, but went from one working in the service, working with 99% men, to now I'm working with 99% women. So it was a change, and you had to get used to it a little bit, but it worked out well. What
were you doing as a lab tech?
What I like about working in a small hospital, if you go to medical technology school, there's like hematology, urinalysis, blood banking, bacteriology, those 4 areas, okay? Well, when you come to a small hospital, you would rotate like every 3 months into every section, okay? So you never lost your education as far as everything you learned in those subjects. And I have had some people that come in, we used to take students to train them, and they'd go say they love blood banking, but when they go to a big hospital, if they had an opening in bacteriology, you'd go in bacteriology, you'd be there the rest of your life. So all that other education you learned when you went to medical school, you'd lose it. But in a small facility, you never lost it because you kept rotating around and learning all the new stuff. So I think a small facility like this was a lot better for me, and I think it's the way to go for a number of people.
We have a photo of you in the lab in 1969 in the bacteriology.
Yep, that was my.
Right here.
Yep, and that is Mary Gary, Mrs. Mary Gary. Yep, she, Pete's Tire Barn. That's Pete's mother, Mary Gary. She was a very, very nice lady. Yep, very nice lady. She worked there for quite a few years before she retired.
Remember the expansion?
The expansions?
Yeah.
Yes, when I first started working there, the main building was just the small first building. Then after I was here, probably 10 or 12 years, they built a section coming out this way. And then there was one more, there was another addition. So I remember back when it was the original hospital. And they've added on, I think, 2 or 3 times since. It's way bigger than when I started working there, believe me. And yet the number of patients back then was a lot higher. We'd have 85, 90 patients a day. And when the last few years before they joined with Haywood, it'd be down to probably 8, 10, 12 patients a day. But when we first started out. But back then, insurances would pay for anything. If the doctor said you go in the hospital, the insurances would pay for it. They don't do that anymore. So that's why the number of patient rooms dropped way down.
What were the major concerns for the hospital during your time there?
Always a major concerns was the income, the number of patients. You had to have the patients to make a living, to have the income. And if you didn't, and plus keeping up with modern technology, because, when you come out, whether it's in a lab or x-ray or wherever it is, if you come out with some of these new machines that are advanced and a lot better, you give you better pictures and results and stuff, but they cost $400,000, $500,000, $700,000. Well, small hospitals don't have that kind of money, so you'd have to wait always a few years before you got the newest and modern technology. Not that the old stuff wasn't good, and the patients were treated fine, but you never had that extra money to buy the most modern equipment, and to pay being a nonprofit, we never could have a retirement plan or anything, so that was a big detriment for when you worked here all the years I did, and there's no retirement plan.
Tell me about how the hospital changed during your time there.
Like I said, they added on all these extra rooms. The laboratory grew from one room. We went into 3 rooms. All the areas were expanding so we could take on more patients. X-rays doubled in size. They went from one little room to 2. The emergency room, when I first started working there, we had an emergency room. It was a room that they kept on weekends or at any time. If anybody came in and they'd have to call a doctor in, we didn't have a doctor on duty there. Okay, there was no emergency room doctor. So you had a room that was set aside if anything happened. They went in there and you had to wait for a doctor to get there. Finally, they had an emergency department set up with staffed by a doctor full time. And this stuff, but back in the original days when I first started working there, they didn't. So if somebody came in an accident, it could be half an hour, 20 minutes before a doctor showed up, because that's just the way it was. There was no emergency room. So they expanded quite a bit, and then they got physical therapy, and it kept up with the times after that.
Do you remember any major medical events, be it like a pandemic or an epidemic?
Yeah, I was in charge of the safety committee for a number of years up there, and we always had emergency management planning. The only one they had a bus accident in Barrie, and I don't remember how many children were involved, but we had to put our emergency plan into motion, and I forgot, we only had 2 or 3 kids brought up to here. I don't know where they sent the rest of them, but when you have an emergency program set up, you put it, all you do is, I think it was, forget the code now, you call, but everybody knew what their job was. And we had down by the emergency entrance, everything was set up so when they did arrive, it was smooth flowing through and everything. And we used to work a lot with the Worcester hospitals as far as these emergency management. Every month we'd get down to meetings down there, and they had set up, you had disaster supplies set up, and we kept some at Mahar in different places in case there was a disaster. But you always went down every month, went over it with I think it was 8 or 10 other hospitals that went down there every month, and 2 or 3 of us would get down on those. So we were up to date on everything, but luckily we never had a major disaster. That we've had some bad car accidents, 5 or 6, 7 people seriously. We'd put those disaster plans in effect, but then we'd helicopter out the real serious ones and that stuff. But yeah, we did have some bad days, that's for sure.